Ron has an extensive background with the airlines, and now working with Mead and Hunt for the last 3 years. He's very well suited for this line of work and to tell us what we really want to know. As I said, Ron has been working with Mead and Hunt for 3 years, and his specialty is small and non-hub airports, which is what we are. He's out of St. Louis. He's married with 2 children, and both of them are in college. Without further ado, Mr. Ron McNeil.
Thank you, John. Excuse me just for a second. As John indicated, I'm Ron McNeil, and I'm with Mead and Hunt out of the St. Louis office. And recently, Mead and Hunt completed a risk assessment study for Colleen. And we found a lot of information, a lot of interesting information, we think. And John asked us to come here today to talk a little bit about the industry in general, background, what's going on in the industry. And many of you read every day what's going on in the airline industry, but I'll try to put some of that into perspective. A little bit about factors affecting small communities and their service, the clean market performance, and what we learned in the air service risk assessment. And then we'll have time for discussion, but it's a small enough group here today that I'd rather keep it informal. If you have questions along the way, don't hesitate to ask them. I think we'll keep on track that way. You know, it's hard to talk about the airlines without talking about the profitability or lack thereof in the industry in general. If you look at this chart going back to 1990, it shows in the early 90s, the airline industry, you can see those 5 years, cumulatively the U.S. airlines lost $13 billion. Then was what was one of the best periods of the airline industry in the late 90s, where overall they were $23 billion. That ended, of course, with the recession and 9/11. And the years that followed, the early 2000 through 2005 period of time, the airline industry lost $35 billion overall. Started to recover somewhat, although it was a questionable and shaky recovery in 2006 and 2007. But the economy, fuel, and so forth really set it on its heels, and there was a pretty significant loss in 2008. All the forecasts I'm looking at suggest there'll be a loss again in 2009. Mixed forecast for 2010, although IATA just came out this week and said that for the international airlines, including U.S. airlines, the world airlines, they're now forecasting 2011 as being the first year that they would expect to see any kind of profitability in the airline industry. Not sure why anyone invests in airlines, but of course, lots and lots of money flows through, and there's a lot of cash flow. If you take a look at that over time, and look at the airline industry back to 1947, when we have reports, and you take all the cumulative reports of all the airlines that operate in the United States, you can see as of 1990, for all those years, in total, it's about a $5 billion profit that was eaten away over that next few year time period, reached a peak in 2000 at about $18 billion. Now, of course, close to a $20 billion cumulative loss for the history of the U.S. airlines. With that as a background, obviously the airlines have a very difficult time. They're doing everything they can to lower their costs, keep their costs down. And what's happened recently, of course, is that we've had bankruptcies, we've had carrier consolidation, Delta and Northwest, and there are many others that have been discussed and are being looked at right now. In addition to that, the U.S. airlines have cut back significantly the amount of capacity and the number of flights that they're operating. From 2000 to 2009, it's just looking at the fourth quarter of the year, because we know there are further reductions taking place. In the fourth quarter, we look at 2000, about 30,000 seats a day, 30,000 flights, excuse me, a day across the U.S. industry. That was cut by 6,700 flights, about 22% between 2000 and 2009. You can see post 2001 with 9/11, there was a tremendous impact, growth through 2004, but now they've been cutting back once again. And importantly, I think, is that since 2007, you see half that reduction took place in the last 2 years. 13% reduction, about 3,400 flights a day taken out of the U.S. airline system. Some of that with airlines that have gone out of business, some of that with consolidation, some with airlines retiring fleets or shifting aircraft off to the desert. Lots and lots of things going through. And also, this is domestic capacity. They've also shifted some of their resources, more of the resources, to the international divisions because they're more profitable, less pricing pressures, and more profitable overall. Now, if you look at the last couple of years, all of the majors have reduced capacity. For the longest time, you saw, every other year was a different carrier who was taking, the chin and maybe doing some reductions. Southwest over time continued to grow. But if you look at the last couple of years overall, there's this 13% reduction in departures and a 12% reduction in seats. I'm not sure why we have this over here. On that right-hand column, 12% reduction in seats, and all of the airlines have participated in this most recent reduction. Southwest is only down 6%, but as you know, they've curtailed aircraft deliveries and basically looked at the industry and said, we've got to make some changes even to the model that we have. So bottom line, Delta Northwest down 15% on seats, American 14%, you can see Continental 14%, all the carriers having some pretty significant decreases. Now, it's not the same throughout their systems. They're basically rearranging the deck chairs in many cases. They've reduced their fleets, but they're also making changes. American at the top, you can see DFW down 4% in flights and 3% in seats, while Chicago is down 15%. This morning, if you notice the announcement from American, they're now going to be growing Chicago once again. They announced they're going to be adding 57 fleets in Chicago and another 12 destinations that are new to the American Airlines system for Chicago. So there's some changes taking place there. It's really an ongoing process. It continues to move where they think they can make money, where they think they can do the best for their systems. Delta, for example, down 15% in Memphis, but Atlanta is up 1% in flights and down 2% in seats. What's happening there with Delta Northwest, of course, is they're reshuffling their entire system, taking planes from Minneapolis and Detroit, moving into Atlanta. So there's a great deal of change taking place there. Frontier, of course, was recently acquired by Republic. It's not quite clear yet what's going to happen in terms of their fleet changes, but we know Republic aircraft will be used extensively as we go forward. United down 17%. And even Southwest, while Dallas is basically flat, Houston is off 8%. So in general, what's happening in the industry is that the airline planners that we work with, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. They really just don't know what to do in many cases. The economy is poor at the moment, even though we're seeing signs of an improvement. They're concerned about the economy going forward, not just the U.S. economy, but the world economies. They're concerned about the flu, what that may do to the airline travelers this winter. Will that have a significant reduction in travel, particularly leisure travel? Really just don't know. Certain parts of the world, or the U.S. Again, if you look at the forecasts, they've been tracking those parts of the world that have been going through their winter, and some of them are having some real difficulties as that approaches the U.S. They're very, very big concerns. I know Allegiant in particular, who relies on leisure travel, has indicated a very big concern in that regards. Consolidation, liquidation means there's less competition, fewer airlines to even talk to about airline service. But carriers, with all that, are still looking for profitable opportunities. We talk to the airlines every day, and as you do planning for an airline, regardless of how well you're doing or how poorly you're doing, you always have a list of what are your best markets and what are your poorest performers. So you look at those poorest performers as being an opportunity. Those aircraft may be available to do something else if you can find a better opportunity. So we continue to talk to the carriers, understand what they're trying to accomplish, changes in their strategy, and what it may mean for us going forward.